You are currently funding a multi-billion-dollar subscription service you never explicitly signed up for, and your lawn is the billing department. Every single time the barometric pressure drops and a summer rainstorm rolls across your property, you are not just watering your grass. You are actively washing your own money directly into the municipal watershed, resetting an invisible ticking clock that the commercial extermination industry relies on for its very survival. Look closely at the financial architecture of the neighborhood mosquito control truck. It is not a service engineered for biological eradication. It is a highly optimized, recurring revenue retention model. Let us isolate the raw economics. A standard residential mosquito treatment costs the average homeowner roughly $150 per application. The actual chemical payload sloshing around inside that 4-gallon commercial backpack sprayer costs the operator exactly $3.47 in raw synthesized materials. That is an exponential profit margin. But in the boardrooms of the agrochemical industry, a high profit margin on a single visit is utterly useless. The entire systemic cost structure of the pest control sector, the fleet vehicles, the franchise fees, the aggressive marketing budgets collapses if the customer only calls once a season. They need you to call back. They need you desperate by mid-July. They need you surrendering your credit card again by late August. How do they mathematically guarantee this forced loyalty? They weaponize atmospheric degradation. The synthetic pyrethroids pumped into your backyard industrial neurotoxins like bifenthrin and cypermethrin are deliberately suspended in highly volatile, water-soluble carrying agents. The chemists designing these mass-market pesticides do not formulate the compounds to adhere to your environment. They formulate them to artificially expire. Industry engineers understand the precise degradation physics of their own products. They know with absolute certainty that ultraviolet radiation from a 90-degree summer sun will begin to violently fracture the molecular bonds of a synthetic pyrethroid in exactly 14 to 17 days. This is an empirical constant. At a mere 0.25 inches of evening precipitation, or even the heavy ambient morning dew common in the deep south, and the chemical structural integrity collapses entirely. The toxic barrier simply detaches from the environment, washing away into the soil. The pesticide does not fail. It performs its true economic function perfectly. It disappears. This is not cartoonish malice. This is the cold, rationalized reality of corporate physics. If an international chemical manufacturer were to patent and distribute a true rain-resistant, permanent biostatic adhesion matrix, a formula that actually stayed where it was sprayed, they would instantly cannibalize 78% of their seasonal repeat business. The entire recurring revenue model would disintegrate overnight. They are economically handcuffed to temporary solutions. They are not selling you mosquito eradication. They are leasing you a temporary illusion of a bug-free yard, fully aware that the lease automatically expires the moment the local humidity spikes. You are trapped on a chemical treadmill, paying a premium to routinely shower your property in engineered obsolescence. And the most devastating part of this entire financial trap, while you are paying $150 a month to coat your property in water-soluble toxins, the actual target, the blood-seeking female mosquito, is entirely unaffected. She is just waiting. To understand why you are losing this war, you must immediately abandon the human perspective. Stop looking at your yard as a flat expanse of grass. Zoom in until the macroscopic world dissolves, until a single blade of ornamental grass looks like a towering redwood, and the canopy of a magnolia tree becomes a dense, impenetrable alien atmosphere. Welcome to the 2 5-foot micro jungle. This is the exact geographic prison of the female mosquito. Unlike the honeybee, which charts high-elevation diurnal flight paths guided by polarized ultraviolet light, the mosquito is a prisoner of barometric pressure and atmospheric moisture. Her biological architecture is hypersensitive to exoskeletal dehydration. If she breaches the 2 5-foot vertical boundary during daylight hours, the thermal updrafts and intense solar radiation will rapidly extract the moisture from her spiracles. Her biological systems will cascade into fatal shock within minutes. She cannot fly high. She cannot survive in the open. So, she sinks. She retreats into a state of suspended biological stasis at the absolute lowest elevations of your property. She hunts for the dense ornamental grasses. the porous bark at the base of shade trees, and the deep, humid undergrowth. But she does not merely sit in the shadows. She executes a highly evolved mechanical survival protocol. She anchors herself upside down, clinging strictly to the underside of the foliage. This is a calculated tactical defense. The top side of a botanical leaf is coated in a thick, waxy lipid layer called the cuticle. This smooth, hydrophobic surface is engineered by nature to deflect water, shedding rain to protect the plant from fungal rot. But underneath the leaf, the biological architecture radically changes. The underside is a rugged, porous landscape of stomata and microscopic hairs called trichome. This inverted terrain traps evaporating soil moisture, creating a hyper-local microclimate that registers exactly 2 to 3 degrees cooler and up to 15% more humid than the surrounding ambient air. This is where the mosquito waits. Now, visualize the arrival of the commercial exterminator. The technician enters your property wielding a high-pressure wand, unleashing a massive, volumetric cloud of synthetic neurotoxin. It looks visually devastating. It looks like total chemical warfare. But observe the strict physics of the application. The technician is executing a top-down blanket spray maneuver. The heavy, water-soluble chemical droplets fall vertically, slamming into the waxy topside of the leaves. The botanical cuticle acts as ballistic armor. Gravity instantly takes control. The expensive chemical payload hits the top of the leaf, beads up, and rolls harmlessly off the edges, splashing into the inert soil below. The pesticide never breaches the underside of the canopy. The exterminator is effectively carpet bombing an impenetrable concrete bunker with water balloons. The entire toxic spectacle is taking place mere millimeters above the mosquito's head, yet she is perfectly, flawlessly shielded by a naturally evolved umbrella. The chemical rain ends. The truck drives away. Beneath the leaf, suspended in her humid microclimate, the female mosquito remains entirely untouched. Her delicate olfactory sensors are pristine. Her lipid layers are intact. She has survived a direct chemical assault simply by understanding the physics of gravity and botany better than the technician you paid to kill her. The sun begins to set. The ambient temperature drops. The barometric pressure shifts. The twilight trigger activates. She detaches from her adhesion point, her sensory organs suddenly flooded with the detection of carbon dioxide exhaled by a mammalian host on your patio. She is fully active. She is hungry. Your yard is completely undefended. When the realization finally sets in that the commercial, top-down chemical assault has failed, the desperate homeowner inevitably turns to the digital echo chamber. You search for a solution. You look for a way to defy gravity, to force the pesticide to wrap around the foliage and cling to the underside of the canopy where the biological target is actually hiding. The internet provides a seemingly brilliant, frictionless answer. Just add dish soap. The blogs and DIY forums are unanimous. They tell you to take your pesticide, pour it into a pump sprayer, and inject a heavy dose of synthetic blue dish detergent to act as a chemical glue. To the untrained, desperate consumer, the logic feels bulletproof. Soap is sticky. Soap binds. Therefore, soap will hold the poison in place. This is a catastrophic miscalculation. To understand the scale of the destruction this internet hack causes, you must look at the brutal, microscopic chemistry of phytotoxicity. You must understand what synthetic dish detergent actually is. It is not a gentle, passive binder. It is an industrial-grade anionic surfactant. It is a highly aggressive, petroleum-derived degreaser, engineered in a laboratory with a singular, violent purpose: to emulsify and obliterate lipids on a molecular level. Now, look back at the living leaf. The top side of that leaf is not just a smooth surface. It is a complex, bioengineered shield known as the epicuticular wax layer, measuring precisely between 0.1 and 10 micrometers in thickness. This microscopic matrix of cutin polymers is the botanical equivalent of human skin. It is the plant's primary immune system. It strictly regulates cellular transpiration, the exact rate at which internal moisture escapes, and it serves as a hardened physical barrier against airborne, pathogenic fungal spores. When you mix synthetic dish detergent into your sprayer and blast it onto your ornamental grasses or vegetable crops, you are not simply applying a glue. You are executing a chemical stripping operation. The moment the anionic surfactant makes contact with the foliage, a violent molecular reaction begins. The synthetic degreaser cannot differentiate between the baked-on grease of a dinner plate and the vital epicuticular wax on a magnolia leaf. It attacks the lipids instantly. Within fractions of a second, the chemical bonds of the plant's biological armor are aggressively emulsified, dissolved, and completely stripped away. The shield is gone. The microscopic stomata are violently exposed to the raw ambient atmosphere. Without the lipid barrier to regulate moisture, the internal water pressure of the leaf cascades into a state of unregulated hyper-transpiration. The plant's cellular moisture rapidly vaporizes into the dry summer air. The structural integrity of the cell walls immediately collapses. Within a strict 48 to 7 2-hour window, the margins of the foliage will begin to curl, blacken, and crisp. Necrotic lesions will spread rapidly across the vascular tissue. You didn't trap the mosquito. You burned your own garden alive. The DIY internet trap lures you into committing botanical arson. By attempting to modify a commercially failed pesticide with an industrial synthetic degreaser, you have toxified your soil, destroyed your pollinators' habitat, and executed your own vegetation. The commercial industry loves this exact failure. When your DIY attempts end in scorched earth and a still thriving mosquito population, you will quietly surrender, pick up the phone, and beg the commercial exterminator to return to the subscription model. You played right into their hands. To break the cycle, you cannot rely on synthetic chemistry. To breach the 2 5-foot micro-jungle and eradicate the threat without causing mass botanical casualties, you must deploy a wholly biological weapon. You need an adhesion matrix that actively mimics nature, paired with a neuroactive payload that is universally lethal to the mosquito, yet entirely invisible to the plant. Enter the botanical payload. To sever your dependency on the synthetic chemical treadmill, you must abandon the laboratory and embrace the raw, unfiltered brutality of botanical warfare. You do not need a synthesized neurotoxin. You need a hyper-potent, bioactive payload that is universally lethal to the insect but entirely invisible to your garden. You need to execute a thermal enzymatic extraction. The primary weapon is not a patented chemical. It is densely granulated garlic powder, but you must strip away your domestic perception of this ingredient. In the culinary world, it is a flavor enhancer. In the realm of entomological survival, it is a volatile, organosulfur-based biological weapon. When you expose precisely 0.25 cups of highly concentrated granulated garlic to 1 gallon of hot water, a violent chemical reaction occurs. The heat breaks down the cellular walls of the dehydrated plant tissue, rapidly catalyzing an enzyme called alliinase. This enzyme immediately converts into a highly unstable, intensely reactive defense compound known as allicin. To a human, the resulting serum simply smells strongly of a pizzeria. To a female mosquito, it is weaponized sensory destruction. A hunting mosquito does not see you. She navigates your property using an incredibly sophisticated, highly calibrated array of olfactory receptor neurons housed within microscopic appendages on her head called maxillary palps. She is tracking a highly specific biochemical signature, the exact plume of carbon dioxide exhaling from your lungs, detecting it down to a staggering concentration of fewer than 50 parts per million. She is a biological heat-seeking missile, locking onto the lactic acid and thermal radiation of your skin. When you coat the 2 5-foot micro-jungle with a concentrated allicin serum, you are detonating a biochemical flashbang across her entire environment. The volatile sulfur compounds violently bind to the receptors on her maxillary palps. It completely overloads her neurological processing center. It does not just repel her, it chemically blinds her. The carbon dioxide signature of your patio simply vanishes from her radar. She is rendered navigationally paralyzed. But sensory blindness is a temporary solution. To achieve true eradication, we require lethality on direct contact. This is why the protocol mandates the introduction of a secondary, highly specific biological agent, pure citric acid. The extermination industry will never explain this precise synergy to you. Citric acid is a severe organic solvent. When a female mosquito resting on the underside of a leaf comes into direct physical contact with the serum, the acidic pH of the citric acid instantly attacks the delicate, waxy epicuticle protecting her own exoskeleton. It compromises her biological armor. The acid actively strips the protective lipids surrounding her spiracles, the microscopic, vulnerable tubes she uses to draw oxygen into her body. With her lipid defenses breached, the liquid Allicin floods directly into her respiratory system. Her nervous system experiences a catastrophic short circuit. Total biological collapse. The multi-billion-dollar pesticide conglomerates are entirely aware of this exact biochemical synergy. How do we know? Because they already package it. If you examine the strict, federally mandated ingredient list of a premium $40 per gallon professional botanical spray like Mosquito Barrier, the illusion instantly shatters. You will find two primary active ingredients: garlic juice and citric acid. That is the entire secret. The chemical packaging sector takes pennies worth of raw pantry botanicals, heavily dilutes them with water, injects a chemical preservative like potassium sorbate, so the plastic jug can sit undisturbed in a hot retail warehouse for 2 years, and sells it back to you at a 1,000% markup. They commodify the raw science, dilute the potency, and hide it behind a premium label. But even these $40 professional botanical sprays contain a fatal structural flaw. The payload is lethal, but it is incomplete. If you spray commercial garlic juice onto your foliage, the very first summer rainstorm will wash it away just like the synthetic toxins. The botanical payload requires a physical anchor, a way to fuse the lethal serum to the underside of the canopy permanently. It requires the adhesion matrix. You possess the biological payload. The volatile sulfur compounds and the organic solvent are suspended in the tank, fully activated and lethal. But in this state, they are utterly useless. If you deploy this serum now, you are simply spraying heavily scented water. The moment it exits the nozzle, gravity will drag it into the soil. The first drop of evening dew will dilute it. The first summer rainstorm will erase it entirely. The chemical payload must be anchored. This is the exact threshold where the multi-billion-dollar pesticide industry actively prays for your failure. They know the internet has tricked you into using synthetic dish detergents that incinerate your foliage. They know commercial garlic sprays lack an industrial binding agent. They want your application to wash away because chemical impermanence is the bedrock of their financial survival. To permanently trap the mosquito, you must construct an unbreakable biological glue. You must engineer the adhesion matrix. The key to this matrix is a singular, highly specific botanical surfactant, pure, unadulterated Castile soap. Do not confuse this with the blue degreasing gel sitting next to your kitchen sink. Synthetic dish detergent is a petroleum-derived anionic surfactant designed to obliterate lipids. Castile soap is the exact opposite. It is produced through a precise, centuries-old chemical process called saponification, combining raw, biological vegetable oils, typically olive, hemp, or coconut, with an alkaline salt. Look closely at the submolecular architecture of a single Castile soap molecule. It is an amphiphilic chain. It operates as a microscopic mechanical claw. One end of the chain is hydrophilic, meaning it aggressively bonds with water. The opposite end is hydrophobic, meaning it violently repels water while simultaneously binding to organic oils and lipids. When you inject exactly 0.25 tablespoons of Castile soap into 1 gallon of your activated botanical serum, you initiate a massive structural transformation. The hydrophobic tails of the soap molecules instantly hunt down the microscopic droplets of volatile allicin and citric acid. They surround the lethal payload, encapsulating the biological weapon inside tightly woven microscopic spheres known as micelles. The lethal compounds are now heavily armored. Now, visualize the deployment. The serum is pressurized and forced through a fine mist nozzle. It enters the 2 5-foot micro jungle as an aerosolized cloud. The micro droplets drift upward, striking the rugged, hairy underside of the magnolia canopy. This is where the biological physics of the adhesion matrix execute perfectly. Because the Castile soap is synthesized entirely from vegetable oils, its chemical structure is fundamentally recognized by the plant's biological immune system. It does not trigger a phytotoxic reaction. It does not strip the protective epicuticular wax. Instead, it creates a seamless biocompatible fusion. The hydrophilic heads of the micelle spheres anchor themselves deeply into the porous stomata and the microscopic trichomes on the underside of the leaf. The matrix locks into place. As the ambient air pulls the remaining water vapor from the droplet, the matrix rapidly cures. What is left behind is a highly viscous, semi-permeable, waterproof botanical mesh fused directly to the foliage. The lethal allicin and citric acid payload is perfectly preserved inside this hardened lipid structure, fully shielded from the atmosphere. You have successfully reverse-engineered the physics of a rainstorm. A heavy summer downpour rolls across your property. The water plummets from the sky, slamming into the waxy topside of the leaves. Gravity pulls the rain harmlessly over the edges. The synthetic neurotoxins of the commercial exterminator are washing directly into the gutter, effectively vaporizing hundreds of dollars of subscription fees. Underneath your canopy, the matrix holds. The rain stops, the humidity rapidly spikes, the barometric pressure drops. The female mosquito, seeking shelter from the intense atmospheric moisture, descends into the micro-jungle. She navigates toward the underside of the foliage. She extends her landing gear. She touches the matrix. The physical contact ruptures the micelle sphere. The armored casing shatters, instantly releasing the concentrated citric acid directly onto her delicate epicuticle. Her lipid defenses are immediately dissolved. The raw, highly volatile allicin floods her respiratory spiracles. Her central nervous system experiences a catastrophic, instantaneous short circuit. She drops from the canopy. You have not just sprayed your yard. You have weaponized the native botany of your property. You have constructed an invisible, rain-resistant, permanent minefield that turns the exact sanctuary the mosquito relies on into a lethal, unavoidable trap. The science is flawless, but the execution requires absolute precision. The theoretical physics of the matrix are flawless, but theory does not kill mosquitoes. Execution does. And execution requires the cold, unyielding discipline of a chemical engineer. If you treat this formulation like a casual household recipe, you will fail. The matrix will collapse, the serum will clog your hardware, and the biological weapon will be rendered utterly inert. You cannot estimate, you cannot guess. You must obey the mathematics of the alchemy. The thermal extraction protocol begins with exactly 1/4 cup of hyper-concentrated, granulated garlic powder per 1 gallon of thermal solvent. The water must be aggressively warm, an exact thermal threshold required to violently force the botanical cellular walls to rupture and fully release the alliinase enzyme. Next, inject exactly 1/2 tablespoon of crystallized citric acid. Finally, you introduce the binding agent. Precisely 1/4 tablespoon of pure Castile soap per gallon. If you're wielding a standard 4-gallon commercial backpack sprayer, the calculus scales to exactly 1 full cup of garlic, 2 tablespoons of citric acid, and 1 single tablespoon of Castile soap. Do not alter these fractions. If you oversaturate the soap ratio, the serum becomes too viscous, mutating from a microscopic binding agent into a suffocating botanical sludge. If you undersaturate the citric acid, the mosquito's lipid armor survives the strike. Once compounded, the payload requires violent mechanical agitation, followed by a strict, mandatory dormant curing period of 15 minutes to a maximum of 24 hours. Why? Because a commercial spray wand utilizes a pressurized aperture measuring merely 0.5 millimeters in diameter. A single microscopic grain of undissolved, calcified garlic will instantly jam the pressure valve, neutralizing your entire offensive line. Wait. Let it dissolve. Once the serum is fully integrated, you face the atmospheric constraints. This is where the operational tension peaks. You are no longer holding a simple garden sprayer. You are wielding a highly pressurized, aerosolized biological weapon. You must constantly monitor the barometric environment. You are strictly forbidden from deploying this matrix if ambient wind speeds exceed 3 miles per hour. The consequences of ignoring atmospheric drift are physically severe. If a sudden thermal updraft catches the aerosolized Allicin cloud and shears it backward into your face, you will instantly inhale millions of microscopically jagged organosulfur particles directly into your respiratory tract. The mucosal membranes lining your sinuses and lungs will instantly register the biological compound as an invasive chemical irritant, triggering violent respiratory spasms and agonizing sinus inflammation. It will feel as though you have inhaled a localized thermal firestorm. Protect your respiratory system. Mask up. Stay upwind. Finally, you must navigate the strict botanical exclusion zones. The multi-billion-dollar extermination complexes fail precisely because they embrace a doctrine of indiscriminate chemical carpet bombing. They saturate everything, annihilating the local honeybee population and collapsing the localized ecological food web in the pursuit of profit. We do not operate with blunt force. We operate with surgical precision. You must actively map your property and establish hard, unbreachable boundaries around any actively flowering vegetation. Never apply the adhesion matrix to a blooming magnolia, a flowering vegetable crop, or an open ornamental petal. The honeybee relies on an incredibly delicate olfactory navigation system, mapping the ultraviolet and biochemical signatures of raw nectar. If your Allicin matrix fuses to a blossom, the flower's biological beacon is instantly jammed. The pollinator is violently repelled. Your vegetable yield will plummet, and your garden will mathematically starve itself into barrenness. You must only target the shadows, the lower trunks, the non-flowering structural grasses, the dense, sunless pathways. You are lacing the exact low-elevation corridors the mosquito relies on for survival, while leaving the high-altitude botanical highways pristine and chemically invisible for the pollinators. Surgical, silent, devastating. When you step back and look at the physical terrain of your yard after the matrix has cured, nothing appears visually altered. The ornamental foliage remains green. The ambient air remains completely clear. But economically, you have just detonated a localized financial EMP directly beneath the commercial extermination sector. Let us isolate and calculate the true, unvarnished cost of your newly acquired independence. A standard commercial pest control franchise requires you to submit to an automatically renewing corporate contract, systematically bleeding your checking account of roughly $150 every 21 to 28 days, beginning in the high humidity weeks of early May and stretching relentlessly into late October. Over a single summer fiscal quarter, you are effortlessly forfeiting nearly $1,000 simply for the privilege of leasing a temporary, water-soluble illusion. Now, quantify the exact economic density of the botanical payload. A bulk, commercial-grade container of heavily granulated, high-pungency garlic powder retails for exactly $8.24. Bulk, food-grade citric acid costs barely $4 per pound. The exact fractional volume of Castile soap required to synthesize the micelle spheres in a single tank is mathematically negligible, amounting to an operational cost of less than 6 cents per application. You are deploying a highly specialized, rain-resistant, biologically lethal 4-gallon matrix for a total unit cost of approximately 83 cents. 83 cents. That is the precise price required to completely sever the financial artery of a multi-billion-dollar recurring revenue machine. The corporate architecture of the modern pest control industry is a fragile house of cards, built entirely upon the fundamental assumption of chemical impermanence. When that first heavy, violent July rainstorm inevitably rolls across your property, the systemic physics of their entire business model are put to the test. Their corporate financial projections rely entirely on that precipitation, washing their synthetic neurotoxins away into the municipal gutters. They possess highly calibrated predictive algorithms, meticulously mapping the regional barometric pressure, calculating the exact statistical moment your property will become overrun, and predicting precisely when you will become desperate enough to call for an emergency mid-season respray. The fleet vehicles are fueled. The chemical tanks are filled with cheap, volatile pyrethroids. The dispatchers are sitting at their desks, waiting for your inevitable surrender. But underneath the dark canopy of your magnolia trees, the microscopic micelle spheres hold fast. The lipid matrix does not dissolve. The Allicin remains violently active, deeply fused to the botanical trichomes, silently waiting for the atmospheric pressure to drop and the twilight trigger to activate. The female mosquito descends from the canopy. The biological trap springs. Her respiratory system collapses. The localized threat is permanently eradicated before it ever breaches your patio. And the phone in the exterminator's regional dispatch office remains utterly, devastatingly silent. The predictive algorithm fails. The recurring revenue pipeline runs completely dry. You have successfully bypassed the corporate hardware paywall and weaponized the exact natural mechanisms that the synthetic chemical cartels have spent decades trying to suppress, dilute, and ignore. By refusing to play their rigged, highly profitable game of engineered obsolescence, you are no longer a passive, fearful consumer trapped on an endless toxic treadmill. You are the architect of your own environmental perimeter. The multi-billion-dollar pest control model requires your absolute ignorance, your seasonal desperation, and your unquestioning financial compliance. It demands that you believe true environmental mastery can only be achieved through industrial synthetic chemistry purchased on a relentless, never-ending subscription loop. You now possess the forbidden mechanical blueprint to break that loop permanently. The 25-foot micro-jungle is sealed, the biological matrix is active, the financial contract is severed.